Ladies and gentlemen, if I could interrupt your appetizers, please keep imbibing, but I thought that we might try to get our evening program underway. And the good news is we're going to try to beat the main course, and so the General and I can be a little bit more laid back, enjoy the wine and the meal, having put this particular part of the evening behind us. So thank you for that. Well, I think that these have been extraordinary proceedings today. I must say I'm very delighted from my vantage point. I hope you all feel that this has brought a bit of a fresh breeze, notwithstanding the weather, to the space security dialogue, and that we're touching on some issues that are not part of the beaten track. We're really trying to get out there, as you can tell, and expand the horizons and work with General Friedling's recommendation on innovation and see if we can't insert some new thinking and ways to put our adversaries at risk, both from a deterrence perspective as well as future penalties, should those be necessary. But right now, we have a special opportunity. Lieutenant General John E. Shaw, as you know, is Deputy Commander of U.S. Space Command. And U.S. Space Command is the unified combatant command responsible for conducting operations in, from, and to space to deter conflict and, if necessary, defeat aggression. I like the sound of that. Deliver space combat power for the Joint Combined Force and defend vital U.S. interests along with our allies and partners. Now, rather than drone on with his highly distinguished resume, which is in your brochures and no doubt you've had a chance to look at already, I'll just take a less formal approach. Lieutenant General Shaw is a true warfighter and a great American. This is not man, train, and equip. If, and sadly more likely when, the proverbial shit hits the fan in space, this is the guy that gets the call, if that's informal enough. And accordingly, that said, it is a great pleasure that I give the floor to Lieutenant General John E. Shaw.
All right, well, good evening. Thanks, Roger, for that great introduction. Never had to quite introduce that quite that way, so thank you. That was wonderful. All right, and let me just again thank you and Jana for your leadership in this forum. What a terrific event. I had not been to one of these before. I'm glad I could make it to number 6, I think it is, and I hope I can come to many more. And what a terrific setting we have here with the Charles Bridge right out here. I was telling a few folks earlier, my favorite bridge in Europe, Prague, one of my favorite cities in Europe. I visited several times when I was stationed in Germany. It's been about 15 years since I was last here. Shame on me. But how wonderful to be back here. All right, this is a high risk but potentially high reward situation. I'm speaking before the main course. That's a little different. Usually it's after. So high risk in that I go too long. Eat all your dinner rolls now so you have nothing to throw at me, to say, sit down, we're hungry. But high reward, if I can get off the stage, we're happy and we can all eat. And like Roger said, I can drink some wine and enjoy my meal. So that's what we're going to go for. All right. Okay, I wanted to start my remarks by noting that earlier this year, we all had the opportunity to see something truly captivating. And for some of us, with a good number of laps around the sun under our belt, it harkens back to something that may have been formative to us in the mid-1980s. I am, of course, referring to Top Gun. Is there anybody here who has not seen the new Top Gun movie? Oh, way too many. All right. Has anybody not seen the original Top Gun movie? Oh boy, okay. You will have to all bear with me, and I promise I will try to make it more about a teaser than a spoiler with regard to the new movie, which you all should go see. But where am I going with this? The story of Top Gun starts actually 1986, for those that actually had a chance to witness it in the theaters back then. I'm one of them. The protagonist is a guy named Pete Mitchell, Lieutenant United States Navy, F-14 pilot. Call sign is? Maverick. My message to you tonight is be a space maverick. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit. What is a maverick? What is a maverick? Yes, somebody who does not abide by conventionality or the status quo, sees something wrong, wants to change it, usually does it with some sort of radical activity. Well, I'll tell you, folks, we're in some interesting times here with space. You've seen the challenges laid out today in the symposium. We'll talk in the conference. We'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow. And I tell you, I think to fix them, we're going to need some space mavericks. We have to do that. And just to harken back to the original movie, which a few of you have not seen, it was a young Tom Cruise playing Pete Mitchell, who did kind of break a lot of the rules. Lots of high-speed passes over control towers and one admiral's daughter. Spoiler alert, the admiral's daughter shows up in the second movie. That's a teaser, get you to go. So as we deal with our challenges, I thought I would sort of identify maybe some examples of mavericks that could help us as maybe role models for us to attack our particular space challenges we have. Now, one of those challenges that we have, and I thought actually Roger did a great, I'm going to use this acronym, ASP, Authoritarian Space Power. You use that in your introductory remarks today. I think that's a term we could start using a little bit more. How do we chart a course to show that these authoritarian space powers are certainly not contributing to the broader good in the space domain? They're actually endangering safety, security, and prosperity. And where can we look to for an example of a maverick who saw those kinds of things in a different environment and was able to call out those kinds of activities? So I hope that all of the Czech natives here will indulge me if I invoke the name Václav Havel. Now, most of us know him as the first, as a president of Czechoslovakia and the first president of the Czech Republic and the role he played in the Velvet Revolution. But his influence goes back a lot further. During 1968, when there were some not so happy things happening here in this city, he was actually live on the air broadcasting things that were going on, letting people know. And before that, he was writing plays, and his plays were satirical. And they were pointing out the absurdity. He would take it ad absurdum, the absurdity of authoritarian rule and how it affected the freedoms of people and how it affected prosperity. His probably most famous play is called, or at least translates into the English as Memorandum. And again, it was taking to absurdity what he saw in the Soviet system. And he was a persistent maverick. He started that when he was first writing in the 1960s, and he did not let up, even when he was being punished for it. And stands today, I think, as we look back from a global perspective, as one of the key figures in the transition to the post-Cold War era. Now, if only we had had him to write for the Netflix show Space Force. The show might have done a better job of pointing out the absurdity of authoritarian space powers and how we can push back on them and how they are not the future. It's freedom-loving peoples in the world that are the future of the space domain. Fortunately, we did not have him. The show's been canceled. I do want to emphasize the show Space Force has been canceled, not the military service. We still have a Space Force in the United States, and it's going to be around for a long time. So Václav Havel, the persistent maverick, who saw absurdity in the current system, found ways to show ad absurdum and to kind of move us all past that. So thank you, Vaclav. For the second challenge, and we talked quite a bit about this today, how do we establish rules of the road, norms, and eventually commitments to enforce those norms in the space domain? How do we evolve those, and how do we make sure that we evolve them quickly enough to keep pace with what we need? So this one, I'm going to go a little bit of a historical analogy here. There are at least a few people here in the audience who probably heard me talk about this before. And I'm very interested, by the way, if there are some academics here that want to do a little more research on this and want to let me know what they find out. But let's go back about 1,000 years. And one of the challenges happening as, no kidding, global maritime commerce was starting to emerge was piracy. As there was an awful lot of valuable stuff traveling on the high seas, there were those that wanted to kind of seize those goods or seize those valuables. And by the way, you paid a steep price if you were caught as a pirate back then, okay? Disney movies notwithstanding about pirates in the Caribbean, all right? Steep price. But it started to get chaotic. The domain was getting a bit chaotic. There wasn't enough regulation. There wasn't enough identification of what's really a pirate versus what is kind of fair game when two nations are at war with one another. And so what started to evolve are the rules of prize on the high seas, prize rules. What's interesting is that these rules really evolved unilaterally among different nations as they kind of all recognized this problem. And one of the ways that it was solved was monarchs or heads of state would designate during time of war or during certain conditions, they would issue letters of marque to authorize pirates, privateers. That was different. They were authorized to do it. Pirates, not so much, but they were authorized to go do it. And this was a norm that started to evolve. And why was it? Mostly because merchants wanted to have some confidence that they could go on the high seas and that they would be protected from pirates, even though there was always going to be the chance they'd be seized if they were faced by a privateer from a nation that maybe was at odds with the nation that they were representing. But this was sort of evolving kind of independently and unevenly at first. That's how it started. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? How did it get to the next level where actually nations started to talk together and actually work together on international admiralty law? That's a great name, by the way, admiralty law, for law on the high seas. What should we call law in space? All right, another homework assignment. Let's find out what we call that. But let me tell you a quick story. It's the story of James Guilford, who was a merchant in the years 1554. And I call him the accidental maverick. He didn't seek out to change the system, but he was a man on a mission. And here's what happened. I'll tell you the short version. He was an Englishman. He was an English merchant. And he was trading in cloth. And he got cloth from France. And he got a French crew, a Norman crew actually, to load all the cloth onto a ship to take it back to England where he could sell it. Unfortunately, relatively short trip you would think, right? Unfortunately, the Dutch at the time were at odds with the French. And on his way back, he's sailing with a French crew. A Dutch privateer comes close aboard and seizes his ship as a prize. He is not happy about this. It's definitely going to slow his business and mess up his business. And in fact, what happens is the Dutch privateer takes him and a few other people aboard onto their ship, and then they put the Dutch flag on what was the French ship and tell them to follow them to Amsterdam, where they'll be interned there as a prize. That other ship never makes it. What happens? A French ship seizes the ship flying the Dutch flag that had French people on it and takes it back to France. So now James, he is really irate, right? He gets to Amsterdam. There's no ship for him to make a claim at in the Dutch Admiralty Court that said, hey, this was seized unnecessarily. It was a French-speaking crew, but I'm an Englishman. This is me. The Dutch, of course, are very sympathetic. They put him on the first English fishing boat they find and send him back to England by himself. So now he gets on a mission. He ends up traveling back to Amsterdam, making claims in the Dutch Admiralty Court. But then he realizes that the other ship never made it. And so now he has to go to France and make claims in their admiralty court. And it just becomes a comedy of errors. And by the way, he never got the cloth back. And in fact, he voluntarily gave over his wallet to the Dutch crew as a sign of cooperation and never got that back either. He made a claim, but it didn't meet admiralty laws because he handed over the wallet voluntarily. What happened out of this, though, and I'm kind of cutting the story to an end here, is it started a realization of, hey, maybe nations need to kind of work together. So in a sense, a neutral, which is what he was at the time, are not unfairly treated in an instance where prize rules are being put in play. And that really was this is back in 1554, way before Westphalia. It was the foundation for a lot of international law that we deal with today, was that incident. He was an accidental maverick, but because he pushed hard, because he was interested in his business rights and opportunities, he actually helped to change prize law to a greater benefit and a greater international agreement and commonality and recognition of norms on the high seas. Sounds like something we might need in space. So James Guilford, accidental maverick. For the last maverick, I'm actually going to invoke Maverick from the movie Top Gun. Now, here's a little bit of spoiler, okay? I know most of you have not seen the second movie. I'll do my best. But it turns out, in 2022, Maverick's kind of old. In fact, he's like really old. If he was a Navy lieutenant in 1986, I mean, he's a Navy captain, but he must be like a 44-year service captain. He's old. And actually, so with that, actually, sadly enough, for us older people, comes some responsibility. He's actually in charge of training and motivating, inspiring a younger generation of Navy pilot to be successful at a warfighting mission against an adversary. This doesn't seem to come that easy to Maverick, the guy who's used to breaking the rules, breaking conventions, but he's now in a position of responsibility. And his bosses are saying, this is your job. You need to do it. I won't spoil the movie much more other than to say he does get that job done, but he doesn't do it conventionally. There's a little rule breaking along the way. So in good Maverick fashion, he was a mentoring Maverick. And I offer that because we've got people in all different parts in their adventure in life here with us today. And some of us are mentors. I'd like to point, Pete Hayes, where are you? Where? Okay, yeah, so I'm going to dime Pete Hayes out here. Captain Hayes actually mentored Cadet John Shaw at the U.S. Air Force Academy. And let me just say, I won't put a year on it, but it wasn't very long after the first Top Gun movie came out. So thanks, Pete. Way back then, you were mentoring me. I learned an awful lot. I still remember that space policy course I took under Captain Pete Hayes. He is still mentoring today. And there's a number of others that have dedicated themselves to service in academia here. Thank you for doing that. We all need to be taking care of the next generation behind us, inspiring them to be thinking outside the box, unconventionally, and in ways that are going to further our nation's interests together in space as we move forward. So that's the message I have for you tonight. Be a space maverick. Pick one of those role models or find another one. But the only way that we're going to overcome the challenges we've been discussing in the conference here today is by not accepting the status quo and probably breaking convention and thinking really hard about how we take it to the next level. So thanks for the opportunity to speak with you here tonight. I think I might have time for just a little bit of Q&A. I think that was written into the script. Okay, very short time, so happy to do that. Yeah, this is perfect, right? Because anyone who asks a question keeps everybody else from eating. Yeah, couldn't be better. Please, ma'am. See yourself as a space maverick? I'd like to think that for a while I've been sort of challenging, hey, we're not thinking hard enough about this. We need to be thinking about the future. We need to be thinking big and large. I hope I can keep doing that. That would be my goal. Thanks. Okay, again, thanks for the opportunity. I hope you all enjoy your dinner, and thanks for being part of this really special conference. It's quite an experience, and like I said, I hope I get to come back multiple times, but thank you. All right.
Leave it to say that we hope so too, and we hope that you preserve some room on your epaulets, because your mentoring is essential to our national well-being and to our allies as well. Thank you, sir.